and then we can talk about that on the other side.
One of the people that I grew up with professionally is a man by the name of Jeff Adachi, who recently passed away. And he was the public defender, the elected public defender of San Francisco. The last conversation that he and I had is he said, Kamala, I want to help advise your policies, and please prioritize resourcing public defense. Because most people who are charged with crimes can't afford to come out of pocket and pay for a lawyer to defend them. Their constitutional right. And that's one of my highest priorities.
So I should just note the San Jose Mercury News is the one reporting that that the police are investigating this death, but we don't know of what. But I mean, she referenced it, which I thought was smart in the sense that this is somebody who in the Asian American community is very much revered. So she sort of made that nod, and to people who care about what he did as a public defender. So that was kind of a way of her sort of making that note in the course of a larger answer. What did you make of that as a Californian?
Indeed, and indeed, Adachi's reputation as a public defender and indeed as a champion of public, civil rights, it was well known throughout the state. I think Adachi was known, first of all, for being Kamala Harris's opponent in a lot of respects, and I think that while certainly it seems like they enjoyed a friendship and a good relationship towards the end of his life. I mean, he was quoted last month in The Guardian telling them that twice he asked her to investigate the San Francisco Police Department, once for racist and homophobic texts that they were sending, and another time for killings that they had been perpetrating. And both times he never received a response. So I think there are questions about her record that she is going to have to deal with a little bit more forthrightly than simply bringing up, past names and past associations and saying that she's going to do things in that person's honor.
And, Jason, I think that is something that the Harris campaign seems to recognize. Like, she had a lot to say on the issues of criminal justice. Even talking, when I asked her prospectively, what would you do to reduce mass incarceration, she went back and actually, referenced some of her record in defense of it. I'm going to play one piece of it where she talked about her role as Attorney General of California in the area of policing. Take a listen.
When I was Attorney General of California, we created the first of its kind implicit bias and procedural justice training of police officers, together with law enforcement leaders, recognizing that that needs to be addressed. When people carry a gun, if they're holding on to racial bias and making decisions about who they stop, who they arrest, or potentially who they shoot, and if that decision is informed by bias, we need to deal with that.
So let's talk about that. I mean, this is going to be part of the record she's going to have to litigate, is her criminal justice record, although her campaign really is focusing on middle-class kitchen table issues.
Right. Joy, this is the Achilles heel of the Harris campaign. The moment that she heads into the real primary, everybody's being nice and playing friendly now, right? But when the Democrats really start stabbing each other in the back, which I'd say is in about 2 or 3 months, this is what she's going to get hit with. Yes, she can talk about implicit bias. Yes, she can talk about improvements that she made marginally in this territory and that. And then people are going to remind her of the fact that she was on record as advocating using prison slave labor to fight forest fires in California. Then people are going to mention the fact that she implemented a truancy policy that basically is the school to prison pipeline that many African Americans and Latinos have complained about. She can't get away from this issue. And I really do think that ultimately this might be her undoing. I think that Senator Harris is a dynamic, intelligent, and highly qualified.
Usiamo le tecnologie più innovative che il creato ci ha dato. Però facciamone
qualified candidate. But if she can't find a way to reconcile the problems with her criminal justice record with the policies that she says that she wants to implement if she becomes president, she's not going to get through a primary.
Yeah. Well, let me go to the wider panel on this, because let's to be fair, Senator Harris does have her defenders. Latifah Simon, among others, have written in defense of her. So it's not like a universally panned record as Attorney General in California. But I'll go to this go to you first on this first question of whether or not Democrats are going to start bloodletting. I'm going to come to you, Karine, because what you've heard is a lot of public pronouncements that is not going to happen. That the Democrats don't want to kind of disembowel each other during what could be a long primary, unless Super Tuesday just shuts it down in March. What do you think? Do you think that this is that what Jason just said is what's going to happen? That these guys are going to tear each other apart, and that Kamala Harris is specifically going to be, taken on specifically on criminal justice issues?
So a couple of things there, Joy. Look, there's not a lot of stomach for that, I think, amongst voters and amongst just, you know, folks who are coming out in these early states, listening to the different, what, dozen or so now of candidates who are vying for the Democratic nomination. I really don't think that's what people want to see. I think folks want to see, what are your bold visions, ideas? How are you, how are you going to bring this country together? How are you going to win? How are you going to fight? Or can you inspire us? So I have to say, I don't think that there's a lot of kind of energy or people wanting that right now. And also, they kind of all know each other. A lot of these senators have worked together. They've been on legislation together. So there is some friendliness there. But you know what? You have you're going to have the debate coming up in June. That's going to be, you got to really be forceful there and make your statement on those first couple of debates. So we'll see how that goes. But I do want to talk also about Kamala Harris's criminal justice record. I think Jason makes really good points. I think he's absolutely right. But she's not the only one in the field, right? You have Amy Klobuchar, who's a former prosecutor. You have Bernie Sanders, who voted on the crime bill. So it shouldn't just be folks should be questioning them as well. And so, but she's going to have to do a better job at answering to her record. I think that's true.
Can I say
yes,
just
please.
respond to that really? So I agree with Karine, but I do think that though the Democratic candidates may not tear each other apart, she's going to have to account to the voters themselves. And quite honestly, Senator Harris has a black man problem. A few weeks ago, Luther Campbell, famous from the 2 Live crew. I wasn't born when they came out. Maybe you guys were. Anyway, no. I remember them well. Oh, man. I remember them well. I'm just kidding. I remember them well. But 2 Live crew, Luther Campbell, I mean, at one point he was like this big, huge superstar, and he's a very active person in Florida. He just got the keys to the city from the mayor down there. So he's a voice that she needs to pay attention to in the battleground state of Florida. And he penned an op-ed criticizing her for her criminal justice record. And listen, it's okay for her to evolve. It's okay for her to develop a new outlook on things. But she has to tell that story. And it can't just be, don't think about what I did last year, just focus on what I'm doing now. And I quite honestly have not heard her tell that story. Jason talked about her truant policy. That impacts disproportionately low-income parents of color. She only recently came out in favor of recreational marijuana use. I mean, that is another thing that impacts people of color. She did not support body cam usage for law enforcement officers. She was not in favor of a bill that was forcing her office to prosecute shootings involving law enforcement officers. So these are things that certainly people at large are going to have questions about, but specifically black men, blue-collar black men, they're going to have a problem with her record. And you're right, Karine, she's not the only person, but I will say I think the African-American community expects more from people who looks like us, particularly a candidate who wants to represent us. It's the old, civil rights saying, you have to love the people to lead the people. And if her record does not look that she has consistently loved the people, then they will not question or they will not trust her ability to lead the people. So she needs to find a strong black man advocate who can be in her corner at some point on the campaign, at some point in any space in her campaign. That I would say that was my key advice. Find a prominent blue-collar, self-made black man to be in your corner and be a validator for her. And she doesn't have that right now.
Well, let's talk about whether or not how does that impact, because the primaries that African Americans are the most numerous in, obviously South Carolina is pivotal. You're going to have 2 African American candidates as of now, Cory Booker and Kamala Harris, going into that primary. And to Karine's point, you also have potentially 2 people who voted for the crime bill, one who helped write it, Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. So if you've got 4 people who are all attached to this issue, all going into the primary, or is what we're saying is that the black lady is the only one who pays, or are they all going to pay enough of a price that opens the lane for a 5th person, someone else?
Joy, here's the thing. As painful as it is for me to say, I completely agree with Tiffany when it comes to this. Like, this is really hard.
You never agree with Tiffany. I don't believe you.
When she goes to South Carolina, I have been saying all along that she is going to have to compete with Cory Booker. And if neither one of them gets like 40% of the African-American vote, not only are they not going to win that state, they probably won't end up on anyone's ticket. And I don't think, let's just be candid. When you're saying that she needs to have an advocate out there for her, it's not going to be her husband. She's got to surround herself with African-American women. We saw them vote for Trump last time in larger numbers than we had seen in 20 years when it comes to Republican candidates. She's going to need that if she's going to be successful in some of these more diverse states.
Or what you're saying there, it sounds like what you're saying there, Jason, is that African African American men are not going to support a black woman candidate. That's kind of what
I'm
it sounds
saying.
like.
African American men might have a problem with a candidate who will be portrayed, fairly or not, as having thrown a lot of black men in jail.
Interesting. All right, my guests are going to come back in the next hour. We will continue more of this debate. There's also a lot more to come. So much more. Keep it here.